Solution.
Sorry, Jason, just wanted to get that.
Yep, no problem. Good
Yep.
call. Good call. That I have that stuck on my monitor. Always record. I forgot to mention that. I do that all the time. Every single recording I have on Zoom is 5 minutes late to the game. So thanks for doing that, Dan. So I really want us to think about our work from that perspective, from a personalized perspective, and I'll talk a little bit about that once we get started. So let me take a breath and share my screen so that we can get launched. Oh, I think I need to get some screen sharing permission, and if that's okay.
Yep.
Thanks so much. Good. And as Dan is executing that piece, here at Mount Wachusett, we currently have a financial wellness program. It's coordinated through student services and through my office, and it focuses not just on financial aid, but all aspects of financial wellness. And that's a little bit about the program that I'm going to talk about. And when Jen and Dan and Sarah approached me about doing this workshop, the timing couldn't be more perfect, because I am in the process of writing a significant grant to talk about creating a financial wellness from a social justice perspective program, so that our campus can create a signature emphasis on financial wellness, not just for our students, but for the communities that we serve. We serve currently 29 cities and towns. We certainly have students from far more than 29 cities and towns, but that is our what we call our catchment area here in the Massachusetts Community College system. And that represents some of the poorest cities and towns in the Commonwealth. And so the commitment to this grant program, and I do think that we will be funded, will be to not only educate and provide opportunities for financial growth and wellness on our campus, but also an external approach, to be working with our K through 12 partners to create an environment and a conversation, sort of a two-generation, a two-gen, as they call it, approach to the work of financial literacy and wellness. Because one of the most important things from a data perspective for us to think about, and it's so difficult to wrap our heads around this conceptually, that a child by the age of 4 years old has made a determining factor about whether or not they will consider higher education. So just think about that for a second, that a child at 4 years old, because of the generational situation and the cultural socioeconomic situation that they are in, is being sent messages about the efficacy and possibility of higher education. So we know that to be true, that those messages begin incredibly early for our young folks. We also know that we can have impact on we can change that. We can have an impact on that trajectory, as long as we start early and we provide opportunities for families and children and kids through the K through 12 system. We provide them access and opportunity to think about their financial wellness differently and their access to education differently. All right, so I think I have sharing, and we can get started here. Okay. Can folks see that? See if I can get this thing started. Okay.
Yes, we can see it, Jason.
Okay, thanks so much. Okay, so I'm going to launch, and as I said to Jen and Dan when we were preparing this session, I am always aggressive in the amount of content that I want to cover. I could talk about this stuff all day, every day, and it's a passion of mine. So I will probably move quickly, and I will stop. I do have a timer on here, so I can stop around 10:20, and we can have a conversation if we don't have one during the presentation. So I want us to think as we begin this conversation about where we are and how we got here. And Dan and Jen in their introductions talked a little bit about our current context and the difficult realities that have impacted us as professionals working on college campuses, but also our students. And that impact has been profound on both sides. And one of the frustrations that I hear from the folks that I work with every day is that our focus is always on what's happening with our students, and that's important and that's critical, and that's why we do what we do. But we can't forget about the impact that our work on students has with us. And one of the things that we know about our financial aid and financial wellness folks is that they have been disproportionately impacted by the stories, the trauma, and the economic disparities that have only exacerbated over the last 18 months in this COVID pandemic. And I think we need to acknowledge that. We need to acknowledge that we have work to do with our students, and setting up a financial wellness program is certainly one key component of that. But we also can't forget about ourselves. And I say this about helping professionals, and as financial aid professionals, you are a helping professional, that one of the things that we are not good at, that our DNA does not help us with, is taking care of ourselves so that we can take care of others. We are often the last people to put that oxygen mask on when the cabin loses air pressure. We run towards a crisis, not away from a crisis. We often find ourselves experiencing the residual trauma of our students, and that is only exacerbated. So I think we need to remember, and I think it's absolutely important for us to consider that, yes, this is a critical time in higher education, but it's also a time that we have an opportunity to reimagine our approach to this work. And that includes executing some balance in the way that we do our work, so that we can be there to truly help our students. The pandemic has provided us a shared human experience that has exacerbated some equity gaps with our students, and has added a different layer of pressure, stress, and real emotional connection with our work. We have seen exemptions in our regulations that have been beneficial for students, and we're approaching a time period where those exemptions may dissipate or revert back to normal. So thinking about how we may be able, as a community of professionals, to lobby to help our students maintain some of those exemptions. The gap between students and administration has widened, and I hear that from students all the time. That physical, literal disconnection from campus has created an even bigger gap between us and our students. And we've developed new critical student needs. So we've always had students who have needed our help and assistance. We now have students who need more, and we have more students with need. And I want us to think about those two buckets at the same time. And I believe that the future of our work in financial aid, in student services, across all of higher education, will all depend on relationships. And that relational leadership, the type of relationships that we make with students, how we link our practice to our policy, is all about empathy and connection, and finding ways for us as professionals to connect with our students. We know that students want to learn just as much outside the classroom as they do inside the classroom. And all of us in financial aid, in student affairs, are educators. We are all teachers. Everything we do with our students has an opportunity to teach them something about who they are and the person that they're becoming. And I think that philosophy is absolutely about embracing vulnerability. And again, that is reciprocal. It's embracing our vulnerability. This work is hard. We need to acknowledge that. And it's also about embracing the vulnerability of our students. It is difficult to hear the stories of our students. It is difficult to work through some of our more complicated cases. And as I say to the folks here on my campus all the time, we can't be afraid of our students. Our student stories are real. And if we give our students permission to share, and they share openly and honestly about who they are and the challenges that they face, we can better help them. Doesn't mean that we do for them, it means that we do with them. But that truth and that experience can really help us make those connections. And that's how we allow our heart to influence our profession and our practice. And bringing your whole self to work every day is hard, it's exhausting. There are days where I imagine we all feel empty at the end of the day. We have nothing else to give to our students or our work. So being able to replenish that heart is really critical. I think the most important thing that we do every single day in our work with students is make our students visible, help them know that they matter, that their situation matters to us. We are not magicians. We cannot make things happen all the time. But the one thing that we can always do when we connect with our students is assure them that we see them, that we acknowledge the situation that they're in, that they are visible to us, that their circumstances matter, and that we're going to do our very best to see them in that moment. And that's what I mean by moments of truth matter. I believe that every interaction with our students is a significant one. For those of us who are working at four-year institutions, we have time to develop relationships. Those of us working at two-year institutions often do not have the same amount of developmental time to build relationships with families and students. We may have just a short window of opportunity to impact that student in the work that we do. So why am I here? Well, I certainly was asked to be here this morning. This is, I think, the third time I've talked to the MASFAA group. The first time that I've done so virtually. I absolutely miss being in person with folks. But the reason why, as a first-generation low-income college student myself, and that's a picture of the UMass Dartmouth Corsair. I know we have at least one other Corsair on the call this morning. But the topic of thinking about financial wellness and thinking about first-generation college students is a passion of mine because I represent that group. And I'm sure I have some other first-generation students, professionals here on this call. And I'm sure that a piece of that identity has drawn you to the work that you do every day. It's certainly the reason why I'm here. I grew up in a low-income background with a single mom. We were evicted. We were hungry. We had no car. We certainly had no money, no disposable income to speak of. We're living on state subsidy, welfare, SNAP benefits, all of the things that we experience with our students was a part of my story. And I want us to think about, as professionals, what our personal and professional story is. And I want you to think about that from an empowering perspective. Because while those things were all true of my story, the one thing that I learned from my family was that education was the most important thing, and that education was the practice of freedom. It was the key to unlock the poverty and the generational poverty that my family had experienced for as long as they were in the United States. I'm a third-generation immigrant from Lithuania, and I grew up with my grandparents and my great-grandparents all in the same three-decker in Worcester. But I was a survivor. Lots of first-generation students are survivors. They're hustlers, they're survivors. They know how to accomplish and be successful based on the experiences that they've had. But the reason why I'm here is I selected UMass Dartmouth because it was the least expensive institution in Massachusetts at the time. And I selected my college, not how guidance counselors often talk to high school juniors and seniors about following your dreams and passions, but I literally selected my college like my family bought cereal. We looked at the prices, and that's how we made decisions. So I arrived at UMass Dartmouth on my first day without my bill paid and having never been on campus once in my life. The first time I saw UMass Dartmouth was the day that I moved in. And the first person I met at UMass Dartmouth was my financial aid counselor, Yolanda, who saved my life. And she saved my life because she saw me when we met. And I still get emotional when I tell this story because I absolutely would not have had a second day at UMass Dartmouth had Yolanda not taken the extra time to escort me into the back of the office and have a conversation with me, get me my work study position, put me on a personal payment plan, and establish my college career on that first day. So the power of the work that we do is absolutely transformational. And everything that I learned about higher education, I learned from Yolanda, my financial aid counselor. So what do we see when we see this picture? And if you are by your chat or by your keyboard, feel free to put something in the chat. But when you look at this picture, you know, what feelings, emotions come to your mind when you look at this picture? Tell me what you see. Love and peace. Powerful. Hi, Lindsay. Listening. Gratefulness. Knowledge comes from everywhere. I love that, Catherine. Thank you. Meeting where someone else is. Yes. This is one of my favorite pictures, and please keep chatting if you have a thought that comes into your mind. This is one of my favorite pictures, and it's hanging in my office. It's from a series of artists by an artist called Ashes in Snow, and it looks at the connection between the human and the natural. But when I look at it, I really see a metaphor for the work that we do. And the artist has this phenomenal quote that I find really powerful that generated this photo. And the quote is, "The stars you see at night are the unblinking eyes of sleeping elephants." And I absolutely love the vision of that quote. And this picture for me is about common ground. It's about trying to explore new narratives that help build a bridge across the boundaries that we have established between ourselves and our students. And there are days when I see myself as the young child, and there are days that I see myself as the elephant. And that changes depending on the work that I'm doing. But if we imagine ourselves as the child, then we imagine that we are also students for life, and we are learning every day. We are learning about our jobs, we're learning about ourselves, and we're growing as people and as professionals. If we imagine ourselves as the elephant, we have that recognition, and many of you have sort of captured that in your own vision of this photograph. We imagine the enormity of the work that we do and how we are often seen by our students, and the importance of bringing ourselves in alignment with our students and giving our students the opportunity to tell us who they are and what they need from us. And for me, this picture is sort of everything about the work that we do and the power and the impact that we have to be both the child, the student, the learner, and the elephant, the person who appears to be dominant in the photo, but just by the very nature of stepping down, laying down, sitting down, being in common ground with, changes the entire dynamic of how they are seen by the student. So I want to jump in now and talk a little bit about the context of COVID. I'm going to share some data and information with folks that have been part of the research that I've been doing in the writing of our financial wellness grant and the building of our program, both our current program and the program that we aspire to have here at Mount Wachusett. If anyone wants me to share some of the data and the information that we talk about, there will be a recording, so Dan and Jen can make sure that folks have access to that. But I will also share my email at the end of my talk with you this morning, and I'm going to stick around and experience the student panel and our speakers later today. I'm very interested in hearing their experiences on their campuses. So please don't hesitate to reach out to me if you want to talk more about this program. But I think it is so obvious to say that the past 17 months have been hard. They have been, and I want to quantify that for folks. Sometimes it's important for us to sort of step out of the experience and see it objectively. I know that's helpful for me. So when we look at, and this research was done very recently within higher education, and looked at, I believe, over 200,000 college students from all different types of colleges and universities from all over the country. And what that extrapolated was that 41% of our students had a close friend or family member develop COVID-19, to get sick during the last 17 months. 7% of our students experienced tested positive for COVID-19. 32% have had to initiate some type of emergency aid. 18% of our students or our student families have enrolled in SNAP or food benefits during the last 17 months. And 52% admitted that they didn't apply for any help or assistance on their campus or in their community because they didn't know about that, that aid existed. And I know this is a common frustration. It's a common frustration for me every day. I have a specific brick on my wall that I bang my head on because students don't read my emails or they don't hear what we're saying. And I have to remind myself that it's never what we say, it's always what they hear, and continue to challenge myself to find ways to get important information into the minds of our students. And email may not always be the way. And it's always frustrating when a student says, I didn't know that that existed, but that's a reality. So I don't say that to further frustrate folks, but just to remind you that even when we're sharing this information, our students don't often receive it, or they're not processing it. So repeating that message in multiple modalities. We have help. This is the help that we have for you. This is how you can access that help. Can be really beneficial, because if you have help and you've designed processes for emergency aid or outreach, you want students to access that. So finding ways, and perhaps our students can share later today on their panel, what's effective in terms of communication and how students best hear about the things that we want them to know about. Before, and I did a presentation at Assumption College in Worcester right before the pandemic about Generation Z. And looking through the roster of who we have here today, many of you are representative of sort of traditional age students, four-year institutions. We've got some grad programs on here as well. And the session was about Generation Z, and one of the, and who they are, what that demographic looks and feels like as a generation, sort of in the aggregate. And one of the key pieces of that generation, many of whom are on our campuses today, is that their families had lived through that sort of second Great Depression. So over 40% of Generation Z have witnessed and experienced the loss of employment by a parent or guardian. That was pre-COVID. So now we are experiencing a student population that has seen multiple disruptions in employment. In a shift to remote work, or being laid off or furloughed, those are all disruptions in employment, and they all cause tremendous financial difficulties, unpredicted difficulties. And we see that in our student populations. And we've talked about that feeling of working in a vice. It really feels, it always was complicated doing the work that you do, but now we have the pressures of declining enrollment, the pressures of increased economic instability, and the pressure of our students are putting on us every day for us to help make this work for them. And both of those mechanisms are turning, and it often feels like we are in the middle trying to exercise the impossible on both sides. And I have tremendous empathy for that. And we need to be talking about that openly and honestly on our campuses and as professionals in our field, about what it feels like and how we can work ourselves through that. And our time is a finite resource. It's hard for us to find time with all of the new work that we find ourselves doing. I am the primary contact tracer at my institution. That's a job that I never wanted to have. I never imagined I would have. I am not an epidemiologist, but I play one from 8 to 4 every day, including on the weekends. Our jobs have changed tremendously. And that has impacted our ability to do the things that we know we need to do. And why it's important for us to think about financial wellness. So who are our students? This is what they've told us. This is what we know about them. They're overwhelmed. 86% of our students today feel stressed, anxious, are accessing some type of mental health services. They feel unsafe. We're bringing our young folks into a culture where they feel unsafe and they're disconnected from mentors and peers and colleagues. Typically, we would be in the same room together. This conversation is very different if we're all looking at one another in a room together. 50% are afraid that they won't have enough money to finish college. One of the important takeaways that I want us all to leave here this morning thinking about is that 91% of our college students across the country are telling us that they lack basic financial literacy. There is the explicit data to reinforce why a financial wellness program is so critical. 75% of college students today are non-traditional, which always begs the question of why we call those students non-traditional when they represent the overwhelming majority of folks that are enrolled in colleges and universities across the country. And by non-traditional, we're talking about students that are over the age of 23, students who are also parents, students who are part-time and working full-time. And we know that our current students they work a lot. They are often working more hours than they are attending school. And for many of our campus programs, school is a full-time job. Imagine what school looks like when you are already working a full-time job on a second or third shift and still trying to make everything, make all those ends meet. And 20% live below the poverty level established by the federal government. I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. This is an art installation that was recently in Grand Central Station. And I bring this up. This is the considered sort of tongue-in-cheek, the most expensive art installation of all time. It is called the Da Vinci of Debt. It represents $470 million of student debt. And what you see in that installation is 2,600 actual college diplomas symbolizing the $470 million of student debt incurred by generating those diplomas, by earning those diplomas. And this installation was the brainchild of a national program to bring attention to student debt and to help students pay down debt. They donate over $1 million to help students pay off their college debt. And I mention this because the profit organization that sponsors this student debt awareness campaign is Natural Light, a beer company. This is an installation created by the Natural Light Beer Company to bring attention to student debt. And I put this on the screen because our students and their families are thinking about the value of higher education. They're thinking about the cost of education in terms of value and debt. And one of the things that we know about our Generation Z students is that they are very nervous about debt. They have grown up in a culture that talks about debt as a negative thing. And while debt is something to be thinking and concerned about, from a financial wellness perspective, most of us are in debt. And I say this to my kids all the time. I don't own anything. everything is sort of somewhere on that debt cycle. I don't own my house, despite the fact that we talk about being homeowners all the time. I don't own my vehicles or cars. What we are learning from the Generation Z population is that they are adverse to any debt. And that makes the conversation around the value of education a more complicated one to have, particularly as we engage in, what is an investment versus what is debt, and what is debt that propels us forward, and what is debt that holds us back. So I mentioned this earlier, we sit in this space where we are talking about a crisis or an opportunity. And what we know to be true is that financial need correlates with lower academic aspirations. Those are the messages that our young folks are getting as early as age 4. We also know that deficits in financial wellness and literacy cost Americans over $415 billion last year alone. That 2/3 of our families lack emergency financial resources. 78% of adults in the United States are currently living paycheck to paycheck, and that is a COVID-19 statistic. And that has risen by over 20% in the last year and a half. Our millennial students, so that's the generation of students that have recently left us within the last 10 to 15 years, are sitting on $1.56 trillion in student debt. And 10% of our Generation Z students are already in default on credit card debt. These feel like crisis opportunities, crisis situations. I see them as opportunities for us to insert ourselves into that financial wellness conversation. As we talk about our financial wellness programming and what the key components of that programming should be, I want us to first identify a critical bias. And this is a bias that I say without judgment. It is a bias that I find popping into my head every once in a while that I need to address head on and quiet occasionally. And this comes from someone who grew up in poverty, who grew up homeless and have lived in a shelter before. When most of us think about financial stability or financial health, we do have some built-in biases that are framed by not only who we are and our origin story, but the culture and climate that we live in. And that's that timing, taste, tribe, training, and temperament, what I call our 5 T's. How did you grow up? What are you comfortable talking about? What types of training have you experienced? What's your temperament? What's your emotional sensibility? How comfortable are you talking about poverty and working with students that are first generation low income? And how much time do you have with those students? But that implicit bias that I want us to think about, acknowledge, and work our way away from is that when we're working with students in poverty or students who come from poverty, our implicit bias often tells us that the student is the problem, that in some way, shape, or form, the student's lack of resources or the student's family's lack of resources is a solvable problem by them. And one of the key components of a financial wellness program that institutes social justice is a recognition that generational systemic poverty produces students on our doorsteps that have little to no ability to exercise freedom from that situation. And that the educational attainment that you have to offer them is that freedom, is that ticket out of generational poverty. So providing that access and equity is the challenge. The student is not the problem. The culture and the societal norms that they've grown up in are, and we can create a financial wellness program and services on our campus to help unlock that. And here's a statistic that is incredibly important for our room to know. Generation Z students access financial aid more than any other student service on your campus. They access financial aid more than any other student service on your campus. And I say that so that you can repeat that with your campus leadership. You are, if not the most important, one of the most important offices on your campus now and moving forward. As we talk about financial instability and insecurity, that should be the impetus for you to resource your office differently, knowing how important it is and how often your students on your campus will use your service versus any other service on your campus. So let's look at the truth and look at our programs, right? So we want to reframe the narrative. These are the current sort of myths that lots of folks hold. You can watch the news any given night and hear some of these myths. This is the myth that leads to the implicit bias that first generation low income students are the problem, or they're contributing to their problem. And these are all myths, right? Poverty is prevalent on your campus. Handouts and emergency aid is not going to bankrupt us as a campus or as a society. And yesterday they made the announcement that they're increasing Social Security checks. And I saw the reaction in the Boston Globe on the comments page. They're giving a cost of living increase to folks who are on subsidized income that they haven't had in years. So we have a divided country when we think about folks that are on that low income scale. So let's build that financial wellness program. And as we do that, I just want to show this graphic. If we have any public health folks on the call, they will have recognized this graphic. It's the upstream downstream public health model. And what it says to us, and what I want us to be thinking about, is a lot of our financial wellness and outreach initiatives, even the work that we do day to day with students, it is rescue based. So if you imagine this pictogram with this sort of backstory, that first generation low income students are rushing to us down a river. They are in crisis. We are on the shores doing our best to save as many students as possible. And I know that you have days, maybe every day, where that's how you feel. You feel like a lifeguard rescuing as many students as possible. And there are some truths there. One is you can't rescue everyone. That this model of rescuing means that some folks are going to slip by you. The folks that can't swim, the folks that are really in trouble, you're going to triage who you save, and you're going to save only the students that you have time to save. So it means some students are not going to make it. And that's the common model on our campuses with respect to financial wellness. We do the best that we can to save as many as we can, but students are going to fall through the cracks, and that's just the nature of the program. What I want us to do is go all the way upstream from a social justice financial wellness model and find out why we have students in the water in the first place. Someone's throwing them in there. There's a reason why our first generation low income students make it through the formative years of their life, not being able to sustain the financial resources necessary to be successful, to attend, to have access or an opportunity in higher education. So our financial wellness program looks to go all the way upstream. And I say this all the time on our campus. If the first financial literacy program that a family goes through is FAFSA night in their junior year, it is too late. That is a downstream philosophy. We have got to be getting our financial wellness information culturally to our young folks and families far, far sooner than when they are applying to college. There are states that have figured this out. There are states in the United States that have financial literacy mandated curriculum beginning in kindergarten. There are even states that begin financial literacy and wellness programs prenatal, and they are required as part of the prenatal care for a mom. Massachusetts has no mandate for financial literacy education curriculum in the Commonwealth at this point. So it's about creating and cultivating a culture of change, which is why the program that I'm building here at Mount Wachusett is going to have that external focus as well as that internal focus. And we'll have a 2-generation approach. So every time we're teaching a student, we're inviting the family to participate in that financial wellness programming. So when we think about this model, we want to look at the collective and the individual. So not just the student, but all of the places that that student touches, their family, their friends, the folks in their workplace, etc. It needs to be passive and active. You need to have messages about financial wellness on your campus, in your residence halls. And it also needs to be active. It needs to be outreach based. You need to be working with students. You need to be, they need to be interactive in the process. It needs to name and dismantle the systems of poverty. And I'll talk a little bit about that if we have time, but can definitely share those systems with you. It needs to be about equity and opportunity. It has to be healthy and optimistic. It has to be forward thinking, that if you learn these principles and practices, the benefits are profound and transformative in your life. And it includes the philosophy that education is the practice of freedom and provides access and equity to all students on your campus. So what matters in your financial wellness programming? It's not just about education and workshops. It is also about programs and safety nets. So we want to make sure that our campuses have those basic needs, on their campus. The support systems are in place. Students can build relationships with folks. They have an opportunity. They know how to access support and help. There is not a lot of bureaucracy to making those asks, that we're linking theory to practice, that we are telling students, we are giving them a positive model of financial wellness, and then we're also giving them opportunities to practice that as part of our programming, and that we have a true growth mindset on our campuses. So what we know is that about our college students is that 50% of them can't make their monthly expenses. 50% of today's college student experiences some form of housing insecurity. They can't make rent. They can't cover their utilities. When we close our residence halls for breaks, they have no safe place to go. So one common practice in your financial wellness programming can be working with Residence Life to provide that break housing for all of your students, particularly your students who identify as not having anywhere safe to go when everyone else is going, quote unquote, home for the holidays or home for the summer. And 20% of our students have persistent food insecurity. If your students can only eat on a meal plan, and when they are not on a meal plan, they are hungry, that is food insecurity. And creating a food pantry and other opportunities on your campus can be really helpful. So if you look at the program and the model, you want to personalize the model so that it meets your student base and population. All of the campuses on the call today are different. All of you have a different population of students. But if you design at the margin and you think about the margins, then you know and you accept that all of you have low-income first-generation students on your campus. So if you design a program that meets the needs of those students in particular, it will be beneficial for all students. That's the concept of universal design, that when you design a program to meet the needs of the folks on the margin, the folks that are often invisible, underrepresented, undersupported, that program will help those who are most in need, but in turn will help all and lift all boats. And you want your program to include psychological, financial behaviors, that social justice, cultural perspective, and the foundational skills. And I know I'm running out of time, so I'm going to zip through some of these. On the foundational skill side, you want to talk about things like saving and spending, budgeting. 3/4 of families in the United States do not have a budget. They do not keep a budget. They spend more than they earn. So that makes having a budget really a moot point. So instituting the concept of budgeting, how to pay your bills, the difference between credit and debit, and establishing credit so that you can have opportunities when you graduate from your four-year institution, incorporating some math for real life. And so making sure that students understand how to do the math that is around compound interest, even simple math around calculating incidental costs, insurance costs, those types of things. And then certainly fraud and identity theft and protecting money, particularly since most of our current college students do all of their banking online, right? They're very susceptible to sort of financial theft. So those foundational skills are incredibly important. In terms of psychological factors, that's where we think about family of origin. Where you came from determines how you look and feel about money. What is your attitude about debt? That's particularly important when you are talking about the value proposition of student loans, both individual student loans, sub and unsub, as well as your Parent Plus loans. You have to have conversations with them about debt and how they're going to approach that debt and how to feel about that debt that are open, honest, and transparent. What their fiscal philosophy is. You all have a philosophy of financial aid. Make sure that's transparent and students know what that is so that they can develop their own fiscal philosophy about what their education is worth and why they should finance their education the way you're recommending they consider doing. Privilege and persistence. Some of our students don't have to think about money, but a lot of our students do. And we don't want to avoid or be afraid of having that conversation. The students that don't need to think about money may not come to your financial wellness program. That's okay. There are still ways to develop foundational skill programs that will help those students as well. And then again, connecting to the why. And the why is that educational attainment and that investment, how much their degree is worth. And it has considerable lifetime earning wealth for them to continue forward with their degree. Financial behaviors, and that includes living within your means, understanding risk tolerance. Time management is also a huge financial behavior, and we know that that will benefit our students. And then this concept of giving. Students who give of their time or give to charity, even small amounts, have a better, healthier connection to their overall finances. So incorporating charity and charitable works and student donations into your programs. And then lastly, the social justice piece, looking at systems of poverty on the local, national, and global level. A statistic that I share all the time when I think about our BIPOC students, our students of color on our campus, and when I talk about this on our campus, that currently right now it takes 242 years for the average Black family to catch up to the wealth of an average white family today. 242 years to catch up to the equity, to the social mobility equity in this country. For the first time in the history of the United States, the majority of newborns born last month were children of color. So students from low income communities of color also consistently score lower on financial literacy assessments, which is that importance of that external communication. So financial wellness is a systems conversation, not a one and done workshop. And so we want to have impact on our students that encourage them to change the system. Generation Z has the power to change the systems of poverty that currently exist in our country, as long as we illuminate them to what they are. Things like predatory mortgage lending, payday loans, check cashing, tax laws, auto title loans, and the reality that medical debt and health insurance is the largest cause of bankruptcy in the United States. And what we know to be true is college graduates, recent college graduates, are the least likely to be covered by health insurance and the most susceptible to bankruptcy as a result of medical costs, which is absolutely critical in a pandemic for sure. So lastly, we want to put students at the center of everything that we do. That's our job. That's the work that we try to do every day with our students. I recognize that we are all understaffed. Most of us are under-resourced, and often we are underwater in the work that we do. So when we imagine an approach and a delivery model that allows you to put the student at the center of their world and your world, what I'm asking you to do is see them as individuals, not as problems. See them as humans, not as numbers. and to create a financial wellness program and a process on your campus that allows those students to have impact and voice. And when you have a student-centered financial wellness program, it's a journey that's developmental through their time with you. It changes the concept of at-risk students to most promise. Those students will tell the story of your institution in powerful ways. I can't tell you how much I give back to UMass Dartmouth and my time and money, given what they did for me and for my entire family. I took my students my kids to UMass Dartmouth when they were little, because that's the reason why their lives and their educational attainment was different. I owe everything to UMass Dartmouth, and I owe everything to Yolanda, and she knows it because she still works at UMass Dartmouth. She's retiring in 2 years. So this is the work that we do. I want to thank you for the work that you do. I know I'm over time, so I want to stop and give Jen and Dan back the controls here. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And I'm going to put my contact information in the chat and so that folks can get in touch with me if they have any questions or they would like some perspective, advice, programming ideas for what we're doing here at Mount Wachusett around financial wellness with our students. And 80% of our students here at Mount Wachusett are first generation low income or students with a documented disability. So you can see that the work that we're doing here is truly attempting to be transformative given the population that we have. So I will stop there. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate you.
Jason, thank you so much for that.
All right, thanks so much. Yep, my head's out there, but yeah, thank you. And I think if it's okay, I think we might just jump right into the students just to get this going. I really think that what you were saying relates so closely to what the students are working on. I'd love to kind of see the dialogue between the students and you and just everybody in this group. So I think if that sounds okay, we'll go ahead and jump right into it. All right. Thank you so much. Okay. All right, so now we're going to have our student panel, and I do believe that we have all the students that are going to be presenting today here right now, so I think we're good to go. Just giving you a little background. So today, instead of going into a lot of detail about each individual type of student financial wellness program, I know there's a lot of different methods of doing this out there, but I think today we're really looking at some of the different perspectives that these students are bringing to the table. So I just want to touch on that there are resources for this. HEFWA, the organization that focuses on financial wellness, has a lot of resources. We, as part of our committee, can always help you with thinking about different models that you might want to do on your campus. There's peer-to-peer counseling, there's student organizations, there's having one student work in your office, lots of different things. But I think for now, we'll just go ahead and just jump right into it. So first off, we have Laura Martinez from Worcester State University. Laura, if you have a ability to unmute yourself and go ahead and kind of describe what you're working on.
Great, thank you so much. I appreciate being able to share a little bit of what I'm working on and my personal experiences in this subject matter. So I thank you all for having me here today. My name is Laura Martinez, and I am a recent Worcester State University graduate class of 2021. A little bit about myself. I immigrated from the Dominican Republic to Worcester, Massachusetts in the early 90s. So I am a non-traditional student. I'm also a first generation student, and I am a small business owner. And I'm also working on a financial literacy app, which is currently in the discovery phases right now. And I am currently a graduate student at Georgetown University. So for me, my story is actually all too common as a first-gen student. I had to kind of navigate a lot of spaces and a lot of systems without support, and also trying to navigate it in another language was extremely challenging for me. So my story is all too common. I went to community college, Quincy, and I went there while working a full-time job. And it was in those struggles and in those really difficult times where I found myself in a place where I felt stuck. I felt like everybody else had the answers to life except for me. And that's kind of where my financial literacy passion started to kind of build. And a lot of my entrepreneurial mindset started to kind of sink in as well, with, of course, the help of a lot of great professors at Worcester State. So I'm working on a few things right now. Currently, like I said before, I'm a small business owner. And what I do is I do a lot of health equity consulting, and health equity focuses on the social determinants to health. And the social determinants to health goes back to safe housing and transportation, racism and discrimination, education, access to healthy foods, and of course, equitable access to education, financial literacy being a focal point here. And through this process, I started to kind of plan and navigate how I can create an app that will be user-friendly for the students, but also create camaraderie. I believe that a lot of the spaces in universities and colleges work in silos, and a lot of students that are like myself are often left out, and we're confused, and we don't really understand how to bridge those gaps to successfully graduate school. I'm hoping that with my financial literacy app, which for right now it's called the Broke Students Guide, we'll create a shared language around the financial aid office and the student population, and provide a bridge of common language where we're not feeling insecure to ask a question. A lot of times when I have interviewed a lot of financial aid officers, I've asked them what's their experience when they're interacting with students. And I kind of got the same answer of, well, they don't really come here, they don't really ask questions. To my response was, well, you can't really ask something that you don't know anything about. So if you don't know how to ask a question, of course, no one's going to you to ask or look for help. So shared language is an important piece. We first generation students are so eager to even know or be presented in a space where we have a seat at the table, that the breakdown of what I'm signing for, what it is, what does it mean when I have this loan, how do I repay it? Those are things that are not being thought through in a way that will really sink in as to what exactly I'm signing for, right? I'm hoping that in my discovery phase, I'll be able to also collaborate with other folks and really depict the missing pieces of it. My unique lens of bridging folks with resources in my current position, and now this opportunity to create this app, I'm hoping that the opportunity that I can present is not a one size fits all, because when we talk about financial literacy, we're not talking about equality, we're talking about equity. And when we talk about equity, we're talking about what shoe size fits you for your issue. So meeting folks where they're at instead of bringing folks to where you're at is the first point that I wanted to kind of make and make it clear that the reason why a lot of financial literacy programs don't work is because they are not focused on an equitable lens. They are not focusing and taking into account that we all come from different backgrounds and we all are a product of our environments. Yet we all want the same things, which is equitable access to education and to have a really good job in the future. So I'm hoping that with the research that I've done, the connections that I have made, and even being in this platform here today, I'm hoping to kind of collaborate and or pick other folks' brain on this process, which I think it's really important. And also to drive home that financial literacy is a public health issue, right? We're talking about undergrads, and we're talking about, when we talk about college, there's this perception of like this 20-something person who is walking around campus eating ramen all day, but this is what a student looks like. You have graduate students that can't own and afford their own home because they have too much debt. And that is what I'm trying to change the narrative on. This is what a student looks like. And we need to normalize the conversations. We need to get to know one another better. And this tool, I'm hoping, will be used as such. It's not a Band-Aid. It's supposed to be a tool to be working with the financial aid office to better communicate, better engagement with the student population. And from my research, I totally get it. I have interviewed a lot of financial aid officers, and they've told me they are at capacity. So how can someone effectively provide services to an individual when they have 30, 100 and more students under their roster? And when you're talking about all of these different students, we're talking about all of those different backgrounds. So I'm hoping that this app will provide that bridge of services, will normalize language, and provide us with a more normalized approach to talking about money. Because I believe that the stigma around money is scary because we don't know. So the more we talk about it, the more we normalize it, and the more comfortable we get with talking about debt and money, we can start to eliminate the inequities of higher education learning.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Laura.
Thank you.
Next, we have Harvard. We have two representatives from the Harvard Financial Aid Initiative and the Harvard First Generation Program. You two could unmute yourselves and.
Hi, everyone. I'm Maiwa. I'm a junior at Harvard, and I work as a student coordinator for the Harvard Financial Aid Initiative, also known as HFI. Can let Harpreet introduce himself.
Yeah, thanks, Maiwa. Hi, everyone. My name is Harpreet. I'm a senior at Harvard, and I work for the Harvard First Generation Program, or HFGP. And a lot of what we do is just first-gen recruitment and outreach to prospective students, but also provide current student support. I'll give it back to you to talk about HFI a little bit.
Yeah, so yeah, HFI kind of follows a similar model. We work with prospective students to help them with the financial aid process. I think for a lot of first-gen immigrant students, it's kind of a daunting process because they've never been through it before. So we just try and relay as much information as possible to make them feel more comfortable going through the application process and understanding all their options. And then as far as current student support, I think there's, as great as Harvard's financial aid program is, you also have to attend the school with lots of different income bracket students. So we really work to support current students there to make sure that they feel comfortable transitioning to Harvard and creating community among low-income students. So we do that through we use traditionally pre-COVID, we would do dinners. We have a newsletter that gives information about free options in the square or nearby Boston area the students can take advantage of so that they can do things on a Friday night that don't break the bank. So just, small things like that, I think that create community, and we work within the financial aid office. So it's great to be able to give our perspective on some programs that they're thinking of rolling out to low-income students.
Yeah, and similarly, HFGP also works through Harvard's admissions and financial aid office. And, just speaking to how daunting the application and financial aid processes are, as Maiwa mentioned, I think it's just as hard to navigate college as a first-gen student. So a lot of what we do on campus is direct students to resources or provide them information, whether that be about life at Harvard or how to access resources, or simply through our newsletters, we also discuss professional development opportunities, internships that first-gen students might not know about, and things of that nature, and programs to apply to just to, one, either develop themselves professionally or academically. And so that's a lot of what HFGP does on campus. So there's a sense of, recruitment as well as outreach to prospective students, but then current student support as a whole.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much. All right, Dana, if you could unmute yourself. Thank you.
Yes, hi, everybody. Thanks so much, Dan and Jason and everybody. It's really an honor to be here with these other student panelists. I am Dana Kimmelman. I work at the Financial Wellness at Penn program. We are an organization on campus that's really committed to financial education for all students, graduate students, undergrads. We started off just last year with just a website and some workshops and digital media. But now this year we've started this really great program of peer-to-peer counseling where any student in the school can come for free and sit down and have a one-on-one session with one of their peer educators like me. And under the supervision of Lindsay Bertram, who's really spearheaded this whole program, we work really to be there for all students in whatever kinds of financial questions they have. We find that a lot of students really just don't even know where to start, as I think Laura mentioned and everybody, and they just really need an accessible resource, a place where it's safe for them to come and sort of ask their stupid questions, or really it's one of the only places that they can come and actually talk about, maybe even whisper about the actual numbers that they're dealing with, their actual budgets, because unfortunately, money is still a really big taboo in society. If you don't happen to be in a family that's comfortable talking about money and also is good with money, you might be going out into the world with really no idea what to do. It's certainly rarely spoken of among friends, especially in the student population. And we are trying to change that. One of the things that we do is we work a little bit with financial aid at Penn, although we are separate. And we'll work with them for specific workshop modules. We often refer students to financial aid when they have a more technical difficulty or question. And similarly, the folks at financial aid will refer students to us, because often financial aid is where they think they need to go to deal with things like, how do I budget my refund that I'm getting? Or what kinds of, what student loan repayment plan is right for me? The financial aid office, of course, is able to very knowledgeably talk them through what their different options are. But one of the things that we try to focus on at Financial Wellness is the fact that, a budget is not just math, right? Money is not just about numbers. It's really about emotions, and what's right for you in managing your money is going to depend on knowing yourself, knowing your behaviors, and what you care about right now in your life. Life as a student is not a monolith. It's different for every student, and it's different at different times in the student's life. A freshman, sort of trying to figure out what their sort of living expenses and books budget is a lot different than a graduating senior preparing for life out there in the real world, which is also a lot different than someone like me, a graduate student, kind of re-entering academia after spending many years in the professional world. So as you may have picked up, this has all been very relevant to my interests. I am a graduate student in the Masters of Behavioral and Decision Sciences program. I spent about 7 years in advertising after studying philosophy in undergrad. Classic move right there. But I am really interested in emotions around money. And this program at Penn that focuses on habits and behavior change is a perfect fit. I've also done volunteer work with the IRS doing tax preparation for folks in the community who can't afford to go to H&R Block and have an accountant go through all their numbers for them. And so that's just another place that I've seen firsthand that people often don't have a go-to resource for talking about money, talking about these sort of sensitive topics around something that's so integral to our lives. So I'm really proud to be involved in this program where we can sort of put emotions and personal priorities right up there with the hard facts and the hard numbers as things that are important in determining how to manage financial life. And what better place to start than in school, where you're in a growth mindset and in a position where you're open to learn.
Great, thank you so much. And so, Lindsay, I'm not sure if you're on the call. Lindsay is the staff supervisor, correct, of your program of the financial wellness at Penn?
Yes, I am.
Oh, great. Thank you, Lindsay. And I thought it might be interesting for the group to understand. So you're not part of the financial aid office, right? You're a separate group.
Yeah, so we're separate. So just for context, we fit under the same umbrella of offices that the financial aid office fits within. So we report to the same individuals, but we do operate separately.
I think this kind of relates to a topic that Jason brought up in one of our chats, and the idea of like making friends throughout the university, and how this financial wellness aspect is really something that's for everyone's responsibility. And cool. All right. So I think we'll go ahead and go to some questions and answers in just kind of a general panel format. So does anyone have any specific questions? I don't see anything in the chat as of right now. But if not, I'll ask the Harvard crew. I'm curious, what are you noting this year among the students you're talking to? What are their main concerns?
Yeah, definitely. So I think the usual trends that we see in terms of when we have prospective students reaching out is what does financial aid at Harvard look like in a general sense? To in terms of the COVID situation, what does testing look like standardized testing? And just a quick clarification question. Did you mean for prospective students or did you mean current students?
Well, a little bit of both, I guess.
Okay.
Yes, definitely what prospective students are looking at, but also current students if there's anything pertinent.
Yeah, definitely. And so, yeah, as I was saying, a lot of it has to do with what financial aid looks like and whether or not COVID has impacted financial aid in any way. And whether or not, yeah, standardized testing and things of that nature look the same as well when applying to Harvard. And I think I want to make room for Maiwa to add on to that if I'm missing anything before we get any deeper, but yeah.
Yeah, I think along those lines, I've seen from prospective students, just like concerns over the process of the application, because I think there's just a lot of confusion when it comes to FAFSA and IDOG and CSS. So a lot of students just kind of want an elaboration on how to go through that. And I think some of their resources in terms of explaining that have kind of been impacted by COVID. So just been walking them through that. And I think other students are worried, like people coming from far away are worried about things like winter coats and how to go through life at Harvard and whether that would incur a cost for them as well. So just what the support resources there are.
Okay, so we now do have a couple questions in the chat. Let's see. So Dana was asked, what's the most frequent stupid questions? And she responded that they get a lot of highly aided students concerned that the savings or income from part-time jobs will affect their aid. Even their siblings' aid. Totally fair question. So I guess for the rest of you, are there any big questions that you get you just that are kind of seem really, I guess a way to phrase this is they seem really easy, but they're common. Like maybe this is something that there's communication not coming from the office or communication that they hear outward that just isn't quite right.
I think that for me, the most common question or statement, which makes me sick to my stomach, is when you get a reimbursement check from your financial aid, that's not your money. A lot of folks believe that that's just an extra amount of money that they have for themselves and they don't have to pay it back. So that has been a very common conversation that I have had with a lot of folks within my community, of that confusion of a reimbursement is a reimbursement. And that word can be misleading to somebody who has no idea what a reimbursement is or what that can look like.
Sure. Here's a question, trying very hard not to sound like an old out of touch lady, but how do you communicate this information? Emailing our students or creating a presentation doesn't seem to generate interest or activity.
I'd love to offer some of what we do at Penn. We have a very multi-pronged approach at financial wellness at Penn. We have your standard websites. We do offer workshops, but we also we have email newsletters that folks sign up for. We have a Facebook, we have an Instagram, and we do more than just, sort of standard posts. We have folks submit questions, and we'll, each of the peer educators will kind of take turns videotaping ourselves, giving the answers. We have a wonderful graphic designer. It's all peer educators, and then we have a graphic designer who makes our little character that you see up in the corner of my slide here. This is Penny. She has dollar bills for wings, and she's a piggy bank. And yeah, we kind of are trying to meet the students where they are on social media. I think we also have a Snapchat, right, Lindsay? We're all over the place.
No Snapchat at this time.
Okay.
You got a MySpace, you got lots of things.
We're everywhere.
Yeah, hit everybody up. I always thought one thing that I found especially interesting at Financial Wellness at Penn was the Note to Pass Self series that you all did on the Instagram account, where you're having students kind of just say little tips about what they really thought or what they should have thought about even just a couple of years ago. I think that's a really interesting way to look at it.
Definitely. Yeah, you want students to really see things coming from their peers or people they can relate to.
Here's an interesting question for anybody on the panel. Have there been any initiatives or projects you've tried that have not gone as planned or didn't work well? Everything worked great? Let's see. I know I can bring up something from a financial wellness program we used to do at the Harvard Kennedy School. We would often try to mix and match when we do sessions. And so we tried to do it at different times that would work. We were hoping for different students at different times. And it actually created more confusion, and people often thought about things. It's like, oh, I thought your sessions were always in the morning or always in the certain times. They had it in their head. And we found that the years that we did it where it was more consistent, such as an afternoon where we tried to be light on classes and things like that, those were more successful years than if we tried to just mix it all over the place. All righty. Here's another question for the group. How are people doing in terms of engagement this year? Are you feeling like your students are engaged, or how is that going?
Yeah, we're getting a lot of interest, especially in some of our workshops that we do. We've had a little mini investing series this year, as well as basic budgeting. We have a moving off campus workshop coming up next week that we're really excited about, that deals with some of the specific issues that come up when you're first moving out of the dorms. And I think it ends up being a really good forum for folks that might not feel totally ready to come for individual counseling. It kind of gives them permission to hang out in a group, see what their peers are asking about, come pick up some swag, some penny swag. But yeah, we're finding that the campus events are doing pretty well, as well as the counseling, really.
And how do you often measure your events? Like, how do you measure engagement?
Yeah, so we do have we have a couple things. We have a survey that we ask folks to fill out at the end. Sometimes we'll say, if you want to come grab a specific swag, show us your completed survey, even though they're anonymous. And we also do, some participation reinforcement as the workshop goes. So if we say, who has some examples of times that you have needed to tighten your budget, if someone raises their hand and gives an example, we'll come over and give them piggy bank or stickers, things like that.
And due to the pandemic, have you been offering more things online? Do you do a hybrid online or in person, or how are you dealing with that?
Yep. Last year, pretty much everything was online. And this year, our workshops are all in person, and our counseling sessions can be in person or on Zoom, which has actually gone really well. I think that probably about maybe a little less than half of my student counseling sessions have been on Zoom. And I can't help but feel like for some of these really busy students, especially, we might not even get to see them if it weren't for that option. Even have some grad students who are off campus, doing internships and things like that we're able to see.
And Laura, this is a question, just curious. Are you still engaging with financial aid offices at this time? Is it something that you are kind of updating your materials and thinking with different groups, or how is that going?
Yeah, I am very thankful that Kim has been an ongoing support for me. And even though I graduated and I'm no longer on campus, her and I still communicate, and she still sends and shares resources with me. And I believe that through that active communication and relationship that we do have, I'm still able to be kind of in the loop of any changes or updates that may be coming up when it comes to the financial aid process as a whole as well.
So a question just in terms of how you all view financial aid offices. Have you noticed any, well, I guess, what are your impressions that maybe we could do better? Is there anything that you see financial aid offices like this would be nice if they were doing for the students?
I think for me, it goes back to like, as a student, I was really frustrated because I felt like I had to like look and chase and find a person, come up with like my question to make sure that it's answered correctly. So like knowing that person ahead of time, or like more actively being aware of who it is that I need to speak with, would be very, very helpful. And it's also my understanding that because of capacity issue, that's kind of tough to do, but creating some sort of like understanding of like, this is who you need to see, this is who you need to speak with, would be very helpful, would have been very helpful for me.
Yeah, I can quickly add on to that. I think that in terms of just first and low income resources on campus, just having a space on maybe a website where all that information is consolidated. So it goes back to Laura's point about knowing who to speak to, but just having that information available in one spot, in one location. I feel like a lot of times if students are seeking resources, they're not very clear on where to go for that sort of information. And so one, just consolidating it, two, just making it known where this information is available.
Yeah, I think something that would make it less daunting for students to talk to their financial aid officers is just being able to have FaceTime with them in like a low pressure setting. So they just feel more comfortable. I've noticed that like even my friends feel more comfortable talking to financial aid officers because I work with HFI, and they've gone to see them like hosting study breaks for their freshman students and like doing just like regular college things. And that's kind of something we're planning to host. Like we're planning to do like a meet HFI, so like people understand who we are and what we're doing for them, and they just feel more comfortable approaching us. So I think that's something that would be a great idea to implement.
Sounds good. Okay, do we have any other questions at this time?
Dan, can I jump in real quick?
Yes, sure.
I just want to thank the student panel for sharing not only what they're doing, but who they are and how it has influenced why they're doing what they're doing, which I think is a critical part of this morning's conversation. And I think, as I mentioned, putting students at the center of everything you do is exactly why this student panel is critical. Because in order for your financial wellness programming to be effective, you have to be connected to the voices of students. And I think, what I heard from our students this morning is pieces of their story and how it's influenced both positively and constructively the way they look at financial wellness, financial aid on our campus. They are giving you, through their experiences, the topics that we should be translating back to our campus communities. So I think one of the effective strategies that we use at Mount Wachusett is that if you really do want students at the center of everything you do, you don't program for them, you program with them, which means their voice is the voice that you listen to when creating your curriculum, right? So, as Laura was talking about her experiences and how she defines herself, I'm thinking of all of the possible ways the first generation language, One of the things that we've been doing here is just taking our heavy docs and translating them so that students can understand them. Because if I'm being honest, as a non-financial aid person, I don't understand them. I mean, let's be real, like they're inaccessible to the average reader. So if we want students and families, and I would also add language and translating it into multiple languages, if that's the population of students you serve, it is for us. If your website is only in English, if your documents are only in English, and you are serving multilingual, bilingual students for whom English is not their native language, then you need to address that, right? And you need to hear students when they say, I don't understand this. And it's not just the content, but it could be the delivery. So I just wanted to sort of put an exclamation mark on the importance of inviting students into the room. And I can't, it's that powerful scene in Hamilton, right? You have to be in the room in order to impact the decision. So you've got to have students around your table when you're making decisions about your educational programming, and that will increase their connection to that programming. If you have students at creating your process, assist reading through your documents, adding their own perspective, putting them on your website, videos about stories of success, what was challenging for them, what do they wish they knew when they came onto campus. I think you'll be far more effective at seeing students as partners in the process and having that be an authentic relationship that builds an ambassador program that folks have talked about. So I just want to thank students for being here and for reminding all of us that that's why we do this work. And if we incorporate their voice in everything that we do, it's going to make a lot more sense than trying to do for them without them.
Thank you very much. And I would echo that as well in terms of when we did our financial aid wellness sessions and always had student leadership through that, it just made our lives so much easier. It's something that I think we are always, and it's natural in financial aid, that we have too much to do all the time. And also we have to comply with everything. We have to focus on compliance. We have to focus on all the nitty gritty rules of financial aid, that it can be hard to really keep students in mind in that way. And I think for us, having 2 meetings a week with students and talking about what's going on in their minds, what's going on at the school, really kept us grounded, and also really made sure that we were providing them the financial wellness stuff that the students really were looking for. I think that really was very helpful, and it also just made all of us feel the real connection to the student body that I think you need to be good in financial aid counseling. All right. So I think we're getting pretty close. Any other questions for the panel? Okay, if not, I think we'll just take a quick break, and then around 11:15, we will begin our final session. All right, thanks everybody.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thank you all.
Thank you. I want to thank everyone who has spoken so far. Our student panelists were wonderful, and that information was so enlightening. So thank you very, very much. We are waiting on one of our next panelists who should arrive any minute, but I wanted to give you a little bit of background on our next session. It was born out of a series of discussions that our committee had while we were looking for a keynote speaker for this for this symposium and trying to form all of it. And the same topic kept coming up as we spoke to different people, and that was humanizing what we do. And you've heard that in Jason's comments. You've heard that with each of our student panelists, and we're continuing with that theme in our next session. It was an exchange that we had with one of our next panelists, Amy Staffier, that helped us move closer to this collaboration. She wrote to us about the importance of never allowing the day-to-day of our jobs to cloud our judgment or to jade us. And she said that more than anything, these students need mentors and servant leaders. And we knew that she was one of the right people for this panel. We've also heard another one of our panelists, Kevin DeRossi, speak about food scarcity at the graduate symposium just before we all went into quarantine at the graduate symposium for MASFAA in 2019. And we've had some further discussions with him about the work that he's doing with at-risk students on his campus. And we knew that he was also a great participant for this panel. And lastly, by stroke of luck, we were fortunate enough to be connected to Helena through our discussions. And we learned about the work that she's doing with first generation and underrepresented students at Southern New Hampshire University. And we really thought that it was important that we share that with you. They've titled their session, A Case for Compassion, Leading with Empathy in the Financial Wellness Conversation. And they're going to share their perspectives and some of the work that each of them have done on their campuses. And then they're going to ask you, we're going to break out and where they're going to ask you to share amongst yourselves and then with the larger group, some of your perspectives and some of the activities that you're doing on your campus. I'm watching the participant list and hoping that Helena comes back on. We did tell her 11:30, but she was going to get back at 11:15, and we know that she's coming from another meeting. Hopefully, I don't think that she is starting, so we're going to get started and let Amy start. But I want to introduce our three speakers. We have Amy Staffier. She's the Assistant Vice President for Student Services and Director of Financial Aid at Simmons University. Helena La Quinta, she's the Director of Inclusive Leadership Development Programs in the Office of the President for Southern New Hampshire University. And Kevin DeRossi, Associate Director of Financial Aid at Salem State University. So thank you so much for being with us today. And I'm going to turn it over to the three of you.
Thank you. Yes, Helena was going to start, but that's all right. We are all flexible people. And so I can kind of start us off. As Jen said, this really is kind of a collaboration. And Kevin, Helena, and myself have had some great conversations. And what we thought we would do was just to start with each of us kind of introducing ourselves just slightly through information about like who we primarily focus on, what some challenges are, and then how we approach helping students. So I can start. I previously was at Harvard, so it was nice to hear from those students. And I have fond memories of the H5 program and the first gen and watching that grow. And about 3.5 years ago, I came to Simmons, which is very different. And in the role that I'm in, my primary focus is all of our students. And we have so many different types of students, and we have a growing population of first-gen students, low-income students. We have about 30% undergrad that are Pell eligible. We have graduate students and seeing in that population the loan debt, and that's a challenge that when I first got here I started working on. We have online students, on-ground students, and then we also just launched a fully online adult degree completer program, undergraduate, so a whole wide range of students. And one of the things that is challenging and it's been mentioned, in the student panel, is just so many different types of students, so many different needs, and how are we able to meet all of those? And one of the things that that I did, in the way that I approach students, and that I encourage my staff, is through this lens of putting the student first. So that is one of our core values. We are best when our students are first. And I think I saw one of my staff on here. They know that I will constantly bring that up, because it's important to acknowledge that, and also to provide for staff something to kind of rally around. So a mission. So we support our students through education, financing, financial education, and exceptional customer service. And when we are always looking at that student first, and meeting them, as has been said, meeting them where they are, I have had so many wonderful responses from students who reach out to say, this person on your staff was so wonderful, walked me through everything that other people in when I was in undergrad, or if I was somewhere else, didn't take that time to really dedicate to me and talk to me. And there is Helena. And so that's a little bit about myself and the students that I am working with. And I know that one of the biggest things that can be hard on the financial aid side is the time that we have to do things. But what I also think is important, and something that I also talk about, is this idea of Kaizen, which is small steps, and will lead to progress. So even if it's some small bit that you're able to do, it is something. So I'm going to move it on to Helena to kind of do her a little bit of an intro with the primary focus challenges and approaching students.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. I'm so glad to be back. I was able to watch the keynote, which was great. And I had to jump over to another meeting, which, shameless plug, I am helping, SNU is helping sponsor the Black New England Conference coming up on the 20th and the 22nd and 23rd. So if you're interested, I put a link in the chat. You can check it out. This is their 15th one, so it's been going on for a while. Really great organization, but I digress. My name is Helena Iaquinta, and I am the Director of Inclusive Leadership Development Programs, actually in the Office of Diversity and Inclusion at Southern New Hampshire University. I've worn many hats within higher education over the past 15 plus years: student activities, athletics, mentorship, Title IX and bias violations, Greek life, academic advising, teaching, the list goes on. But I'm so honored to be here today to talk with each of you about empathy and compassion, because if not for the role that each of you play, many students would not be able to take part in college. So they wouldn't get to do all those extracurricular things that I've always been a part of. So it sounds like Amy already shared a little bit about our framework for today. And so my primary focus is working with students who've been minoritized, and primarily first-generation students. We really think that that is a neutral approach to the largest dissection of students, which cuts across socioeconomic status, religion, race, gender, age, ability. And I think it's so important to be able to grab the largest dissection of students, because it gives them an identity to connect around, but also helps them realize that they're not alone, which I think becomes one of the hardest parts for some of our students, especially around financial wellness, because they don't even know the questions to ask, let alone feel comfortable asking them. So challenges that we find in this work is really committing to setting a baseline for how to reach populations. I feel like a lot of schools worry about over surveying or expecting students to self-disclose, and we underestimate the ease at which it would be to just add a question to our regular everyday correspondence. For example, asking the question, What do you think I need to know about you in order to best support you? Or tell me your story. Those can really help as you try to support and advise a student, even especially in financial wellness, because you're learning enough about the student to be able to find solutions together. And I'll add the caveat here because I totally get that that can also open a whole bunch of additional things. And ideally, you want to set the stage to when you're asking those types of questions to keep it in a professional context. I don't expect you to be a therapist, and I know we're not all trained in how to treat trauma, but when you're looking at how to be more financially well, there's really some hidden Easter eggs in there that are so important. And so what they should share should be relevant to your role in supporting them. So setting boundaries, I'll leave it at that. But when you draw boundaries, you actually show you care. So don't ever be afraid to do that. And then I'll end with, how we approach our students. We're really fortunate that we're able to create pilots based off of a recent social justice initiative. I know we always use this phrase like meet students where they are, but this pilot that I recently ran over the last 6 months was a space to co-create together with first generation students. And we created a private group space for them to build relationships and facilitated small group sessions twice a month. We were astonished at how much these students relied on each other. Even in that first month, I know Jason spoke in the keynote this morning about, students don't always process emails, right? And the type of jargon and language that we use is foreign to them. But when they hear it from each other, they suddenly can speak it in a way that helps them understand it. And so students realized within 2 to 3 months that they listened to each other more than they listened to our staff. And so the same type of resources that we were trying to get to them, they heard it when their peers said it. And so, for example, SNU has a relationship with a third party called Sophia Learning. It's a very low cost way for students to take classes that can count towards their degree. And I'm talking sometimes they have deals for $60 or $80 a month, maybe $100 a month at the most, but they can take as many classes as they can in that time. And for students that are at risk of meeting their aggregate limit for loans, this could be the difference to completing their degree or not without worry and stress. So that's huge. And dozens of students have missed the emails that the university has sent. So I realize hosting a space for students to connect may be completely out of scope for some of you, and it's super time intensive. But there are other ways to consider getting students together around identities. And that could be by attending affinity groups or clubs that are already in existence and taking your work on the road to show them. Because what we've learned is that students who are afraid to ask individually will be more likely to ask in a group if they think it's going to benefit their peers, not just them. And so I hope today that you'll consider ways that we can make space for that kind of compassion for our students. And ultimately, we know they want to be heard. And by giving them that space, we'll transform how we're able to work with them. So I don't know if Kevin has gone, but I can pass it over to you.
I have not gone, so I will go next. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me here today. My name is Kevin Drusi. I am the Associate Director of Financial Aid here at Salem State University. My background, I've been in financial aid for about 24 years now, and God bless the Zoom filters because I look very youthful. But prior to my foray into financial aid, I worked in human services, substance abuse counseling, high school guidance, I was a street worker in South Boston during the explosion of heroin and cluster suicides back in the 90s. So, I've seen some things. I've dealt with many different people from many different backgrounds. And I think that all sort of helps me to do my job here now. So primarily at Salem State, I work with our housing insecure students, our DCF, foster and adopted students, our veterans, our students that aren't meeting SAP, and pretty much any small niche population that kind of needs a little help every now and then is the population that I work with here. I've heard a running theme that, financial aid offices are busy. We don't have a lot of time, and that is entirely true. I mean, Salem State, we have about 6,000 students on average. I have 3 staff members and myself and a director doing all the financial aid counseling and processing for that group. So I totally feel and understand how it's very easy to kind of separate yourself from the student. But the underlying thing is we are here for the students. It's very easy to just kind of lump them all into one group. Oh, those students. How many people in this room have said, oh, students just don't read emails? True, some students don't, but many students do. So it's really important to take that step back. And I'm guilty of not doing it. I will be the first to admit it. I don't do it all the time. I try, but it's very important to take that step back and see the person that you're dealing with as just that person, not a group of people, not a generalization of experiences you've had with other students in this situation. So I kind of go with a bunch of W's and an H. Who is in front of you? Because that person is an individual. They're not the culmination of 24 years of experience of financial aid that I have, or however, or whatever experience you guys have had. What brought them to you? It could be something as simple as, yes, they truly forgot to file their FAFSA, slipped their mind. But there could be underlying issues. 9 out of 10 times, there are underlying reasons why a student didn't do what they were supposed to do, or, what brought, sorry, lost track for a second. People are walking by my office. It's a little weird. We are now semi-integrated with people on site. So I've been alone in this building with 3 other people for a year and a half. So seeing other people walk by is a little, the other why. So situations may be similar, but reasons have vast and varied. As the old saying goes, the devil is in the details. So a student presents for satisfactory academic progress. Yeah, the reason is because you're failing all of your classes. But why are they failing their classes? Is it just a disinterest? Are they in the wrong major? Do they have a learning disability that was identified in high school, but they didn't realize that they could utilize services on a college campus? Where is that student? Where is that person? And when I say where, I don't mean, physically, oh, they're in my office. No, where are they emotionally? Where is their maturity level? These things all sort of help me guide the way that I'm going to interact with the student and kind of change up my techniques and my track that I want to put them on. A student who is in a great place, they have a maturity level, you can kind of give them multiple steps to work on and say, hey, I need you to do X, Y, Z, and send them off knowing that they're going to do X, Y, and Z. But another student where their maturity level may not be that high, you don't want to overwhelm them because they're coming to you because they're already overwhelmed. So you have to learn to kind of gauge the person that is there in front of you. And the H in the list is the how. How can I actually help them? There are a lot of things that are outside of the realm of a financial aid administrator. Again, if a student was under a 503 plan or on an IEP in high school, that's outside of my realm of helping them academically with their satisfactory academic progress. However, you can help by building bridges on campus. I work very closely with disability services, with our Center for Academic Excellence, with our advising office, our TRIO office, Res Life, our student advocacy office. By building those bridges, you may not be able to help a student get to where they need to be, but you will know somebody and you can put that student in touch with the person that they need help with. I don't want to ramble too long, but basically build the bridges, know who's in front of you, understand that everyone is an individual. One student I wanted to talk about really briefly was I had a SAP student. He was not doing well at all, Called him into my office because I had denied his appeal. He insisted on a meeting, even though in all of my publications for SAP, it says appeal decisions cannot be, that's it, one and done. Comes into my office, we're talking. It turns out that he didn't want to be in school. That was not what he wanted to be. That's not what his life goal was. He wanted to join the Marines. But he was so afraid to tell his mother that school isn't for me, because she had groomed him as a child. Oh, you're going to go to college, you're going to go to college, you're going to go to college. It wasn't what he wanted to be. So he and I called his mom, and we had a very awkward and uncomfortable conversation. But by the end of it, she wasn't taking out plus loans for a student that was pulling a 1 point whatever GPA. He wasn't spending time, effort, and energy in a role or in a field that he did not want to be in. He did leave Salem State. We lost that student. However, he did end up becoming a Marine, and he served 4 years. He loved it. He went through one of their education training programs there. And this was 10 years ago. I still get a note from him every now and then, just let me know how he's doing. He's happy. He was not happy at Salem State, but he didn't know how to get out of that unhappiness. So sometimes you have to step outside of your comfort zone to help a student stay in their comfort zone or be in their comfort zone. Pass it back to Helena.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. There's so much truth to everything we've been sharing. And so, we wanted to take a couple of minutes to also talk about what we've learned around empathy and compassion. And I would say over this past year and a half since COVID showed up, I think that's really changed how we interact with students, because students need authentic and human connection more than ever. I think we all do. And so when we take the time to treat them as individuals, that goes such a long way. And so the conversation that you might have might literally be the only compassionate conversation that person has their whole week, maybe their whole month. And so that's why it's so important to be not just reading a script and focusing on how you can uniquely help that individual. The most common thing I've heard in the last 18 months is, life happens. And this is unprecedented for all of us. So like what's happening in life is almost compounded so much that it's like, how do we work with that, right? And how do we not automatically assume that it's an excuse, that it's reality? And I think, Jason did a great job earlier today breaking down minoritized groups and how COVID has affected them at higher rates and disproportionately, right? So getting it out of our own head, our own biases around what the excuses have been in the past, like this is a whole new playing field for us. So how do you get away from strictly the policies that we have to listen to what students need? I'm sure it's been echoed many times, but like the FAFSA can be one of the biggest barriers for minoritized students, right? The number of times we hear families say that they don't know what it is, like hurts to hear. Or students who don't qualify because they didn't fill it out properly. There's so many layers there around how encouraging words, patience, and even taking a little extra time with these families can truly change how they receive their funds, right? It's like we have to be that person for them, even when we don't have the time or energy. So, last thing I kind of put on there was like really finding out what that student needs changes, because, I talked about those 2 questions you can ask, but also, just clarifying the emails that go out. Like think about that call right after receiving the email. And you all know the email I'm talking about, the one that says that their account is not up to date. And if they don't get it up to date, they're going to be removed from classes. No matter how we word that particular email, it's going to bring up a lot of emotions, right? Failure, I have no future. What am I going to do now? I'm letting my whole family down. How will I eat? So they may be paralyzed in fear or already in a defensive space, right? So like, how do we recenter in order to get them away from that fear place, to point them to solutions. And the thing is, they don't think that there are solutions. They saw black and white paper that said this, or an email that said this, and to them, there's no other option. So how do you make sure that you can alter that journey for that student in a way that's going to help them and not harm them? So that's really where I go when I think about how empathy and compassion can change the conversations that we have regularly. And I'll shoot it back over to Amy.
I'm going to grab that because that is something that is so critical. And things that I look at constantly are communications that we send out to students, whether that is, their financial aid package and the words or the acronyms or the assumptions of knowledge, right, that someone will understand. And every year it's looking at that and making changes from conversations I've had with students and families, right? And kind of trying to incorporate so that they can be something that is understood as best as possible, right, by all of the students that you're working with. Additionally, I hate hearing, oh, but this is what we've always done. This is what we do, right? Yes, we have to send SAP notifications, and yes, we have to send an update that you're past due. But if we can look at how we word it, and if we can provide what I always talk about is just a small bit of hope, right? A line for them. If we are providing always, what we can do, right? There are rules we have to follow, but there are oftentimes the ability for us to use, and in the financial aid world, professional judgment. There are ways around certain things. And I think it's important to utilize those and acknowledge that not everyone fits into this bucket of, they just are a bad person, right? And they're failing at something, when there's often so much more surround. So if you can put an appeal process in place for say a loss of a merit scholarship, because certainly things happen, right? If you can find ways within your SAP policy to be a little more understanding of those kind of first years coming in. We just went to a process where we have a sliding scale that has just been put into place, and that's going to help a lot of students. And particularly we saw students last year where during the pandemic realizing that online learning isn't for me, the home environment that I'm in. And so understanding that and understanding that many times people will shut down, right? If something has happened and now they've gotten this notice that they, owe this money, and they shut down. And sometimes we make assumptions on, oh, well, they just aren't being in touch. But there's oftentimes reasons behind that, and remembering that. And when you are communicating with students, to always be really conscious of what you are saying. And sometimes it can be difficult. I had a really difficult conversation this morning with a student, but I'm understanding that where they are coming from and the lens that they are coming at, our office or me, that's not against us. That is something that, I understand you're, don't have money. What can I do to help? And I always try and put some bit of something that, even if it isn't going to fully solve an issue. And so often when you put that out there and you kind of put your own heart out there a little bit, I have seen such great response from students, and just a calming or an ease. If they're sitting there with me and you begin to ask those questions, like you said, Helena, of them, how can I help you, right? It all of a sudden makes the communication a little bit different. There's a little different air in the room, right? It helps diffuse And so, empathy and compassion is just, such a big game changer in my eyes in communicating with anyone and with your colleagues as well. I mean, talking, Kevin, about building relationships with different offices. You do that, and then you're able to help students even more because you have, built these different bridges and connections where you can, bring students to. You're up, Kevin.
It's very difficult, I'll admit, as you get older, to kind of put yourself into the mind frame of an adolescent. I mean, biologically, their brain's not fully formed until they're 24 years old. And trying to keep that in mind, that you're dealing with somebody who is still developing and still growing, goes a long way. And it's difficult. Again, I'll say it again. There are days that I don't want to deal with the student who's called 3 times and has been trying to reach me. But you never know what's going to happen as a result of that conversation. And by putting yourself into their mindset. It's a little weird sometimes. I'm also very open with students. I'm very relaxed and casual, as you can probably tell. Those of you that know me know that I'm not a shirt and tie, wearing a suit jacket, blah, blah, blah. I'm pretty down to earth. And I have no problem sharing with students my academic history. And I actually show them my transcript at Salem State from 1988 when I got dismissed for having a 0.75 GPA. And just to kind of, you want to connect with them on some way. So if you're dealing with a student who is having a SAP issue, being that open with them kind of, it drops that barrier of them versus us. You know, they're just sort of, they're like, okay, yeah, he's a financial aid administrator, he's a financial aid guy, he's taking my money away, but he kind of gets what I'm saying. And to kind of add on to what Amy talked about, you know, having policies in place to help students, even if they're not aware that you're helping them. We implemented as part of our cleanup process each year, if a student had a part-time grant and they're now full-time, yeah, we're going to take away the part-time grant, but we're going to replace it with something else, because why should they be penalized for going full-time instead of part-time? Some of our merit scholarships, they're required to be full-time, especially this past year and a half during the pandemic. If a student was 3/4 time, half-time, and they would lose that $1,000 honors grant or whichever grant it was, I made sure we went in and we replaced it with other institutional aid, or if they were eligible, we replaced it with tuition waiver or cash grant, anything, because in these unprecedented times, which I guess now after a year are precedented, but you know, you need the compassion. You need to really put yourself in that student's shoes and walk a mile in them. And I was not a stellar student, obviously. Even when I went back to school, I was not a stellar student. Students need, and people in general, they need a way out. You don't want anyone to feel like they're backed into a corner. Even SAP students that have failed SAP that I cannot approve their appeal at the time. A few years ago, I developed a new special probation contract. It's sort of like double secret probation from Animal House. But basically, if a student is denied aid here at Salem State because of SAP standing, I will work with the student, meet with them one-on-one, and give them the opportunity to come back to Salem State, a pathway back. If they're relying on financial aid and they're not going to be able to attend Salem State without it, we sit down, we have a long conversation, figure out what's going on, and then I send them to one of our community colleges. I tell them, go to North Shore Community College, go to RCC, go to Bunker Hill. Do 2 semesters, you can still receive financial aid there. Show me that you can successfully complete, that you are capable of the academic work. You bring those transcripts to me, we'll reinstate your aid and bring you back in. So I help them with the leave of absence paperwork. I help them connect with the individual community colleges. They work with advising to kind of make sure whatever courses they're going to take will transfer back in. And it gives students that may be feeling that there is no hope, it gives them that little bit of hope. It gives them that spark that says, I'm not backed into a corner, I have options now. And I think students, as well as all of us, we'd like to know that there are options. Nobody likes to just be, okay, this is it, this is the way it has to be, and there's no deviating from it. Because that's uncomfortable. And a student who is going through whatever they're going through has that added level of they're disappointing somebody. I can't tell you how many students I've talked to that say, well, my mother's going to be so disappointed. My aunt's going to be so disappointed. My grandmother's going to be so disappointed. And I look at them and I say, why are you at Salem State? Are you at Salem State for them, or are you at Salem State for yourself? And the pause that you get, you can kind of see something click. And I've had students, like that student I mentioned earlier, did not want a college career. He wanted a military career. And asking that one simple question for a student who is struggling academically, why are you here? You should not be here for your mom. You should not be here for your aunt. You should not be here because somebody told you you should go to college. You need to be here because you want to be. And the number of students that I've offered this special probation, come back in a year or two, only about 50% do, because that's the 50% that really wanted to be at Salem State, that really wanted to further their academic career. So there are policies that you can put in place. I'm fortunate, like I said, I've been here about 17 years. I have a lot of leeway and I have a lot of autonomy in my role. Always within federal guidelines, of course. Always never breaking the rules. I may bend them so you can hear them creak a little bit, but just bending the rules within the guidelines to help a student that could make all of the difference in that student's life, that feels good. It honestly feels good. I've had students come back who I maybe talked to once in 5 years over the phone, and they come back and they're like, I just wanted to thank you because you gave me that chance on this date. And you explained, you gave me options, you explained what I needed to do, and they made it through. Communicating, being in the present moment with that student is what's important. We all have tons of stuff going on. We all have stuff going on in our lives that make it difficult for us to be present with another person. And putting that stuff aside is difficult. I'm not going to say this is easy. I'm not going to say that, you know, every single student you should treat like they're the only person in the world, but you should try to treat every single student like they're the only person in the world. You're not always going to be successful. Don't beat yourself up if you're not, but look at your own internal policies. Kind of figure out where you are within your office and what kind of autonomy do you have? What kind of connections and relationships with higher ups do you have that you can maybe help put policies in place and help change procedures and processes to make it easier for our at-risk students and all students in general. I think a lot of people forget that many people in my age bracket, we were first generation. It was not a catchword back then, like it was unheard of, but we were first generation. And trying to think back to when you were getting ready to go to school or navigating yourself through higher education, trying to kind of put yourself back in that mindset of, that's right, this sucked back then. And the FAFSA was way more difficult. I'm sure some of you know, the FAFSA was nothing like it is today. And yet people are still struggling with it because it's intimidating. Even as much as they've simplified it, it's intimidating. So trying to get your own mindset back to what it was like when you were in school. And then looking through that lens when you're working with students. That would be like one of my key recommendations. Alina?
Awesome. Thank you for that, Kevin. I think you spoke a lot to like personifying the situation rather than it just being like, we must follow these rules. And it's so easy to get stuck. But it's so much more impactful for the student when you build those relationships with them. And your story about your student really speaks to that. All right. So I know a lot of you have been here since like 9:15 today. Hopefully you've been doing some stretching as we go. We're going to try something a little different to get everybody interacting. We're actually going to randomly assign you to breakout rooms. I know don't panic. We want you to stay and participate. About 4 or 5 people per room. There's several prompts that we've put together on a Google slide deck. We're not asking you to answer every single question in the small amount of time that we send you off, but we're really hoping that you find 1 or 2 that resonates with you as a group. So don't think you have to put something for everyone. It's simply to offer different scenarios to consider, or what's even possible for you in your different schools and departments. So you can write directly on these slides or use the notes section below the slide. And please note that whichever breakout room you're assigned to, so like breakout room 1 will use slide 1, breakout room 5 will use slide 5. That's just an easy way to find whichever one you're in. So take note of which number room you're jumping into before you click accept, just so you know which slide deck to go to. There's some instructions on there, but essentially we're hoping that you'll have a note taker who will take notes on the slide, and then a reporter when we come back to the main room who will share out some of your top takeaways. So yeah, I did want to share like a couple guidelines for your conversation. Introduce yourselves and what school you're representing. Be respectful. Share the airtime. Listen to understand. And this one I really love is challenge behaviors, not people. So as you get into the conversation, it's really easy to like focus on blaming, right? But I would say, think about the structure that's in place rather than the people that could be behind it. So we're going to send you off for about 15 to 18 minutes. So if you think about that as like 3 to 5 minutes per each question, get to as many as you can. I'm going to put this link right now for everyone to click. It's kind of long. I promise it's not spam. That will go directly to the Google Doc. So click that now to make sure everyone has access. And I did put edit and review. So hopefully you shouldn't have any issues there. If for any reason someone needs something, feel free to just click back into the main room or ask for help. But like I said, we'll call you back in about 15 minutes or so. And then we hope to have a larger, broader discussion together. And yes, if you are comfortable turning on your cameras, that would be great. I'm also going to pause the recording.
We didn't decide, but it's not going to be me. So Stephanie or Jennifer or Miriam, perhaps.
Amy, it's you by default. I tried to pull that in my group. I was like, oh, conflict of interest. I'm a panel person. I can't be the reporter.
I think Stephanie's talking, but you're muted.
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
Sorry, I just said I can do it a million times. Hold on. I was just bringing it up. Sorry about that. Okay. So we had question 4, right? Group 5, right?
5, yeah.
So we focused on just a couple of them. I think we focused on question 4 and 7. Telling friend, we basically tell friends and family the same thing as students. It's the same answer no matter who you're talking to. I was joking around how I don't give my family advice because they don't listen to me. I'm the youngest of 8. So, but friends of friends, whoever it is, I get everybody in the room, the ex-husbands, ex-wives, whoever it might be, and make sure everybody is getting the same message. We think that's really important. The language you use with a friend might be a little bit different, but it's still the same message. The policies are the same. The process is the same. We also talked about how it's important to validate families' personal situation. And I personally speak to a lot of families who are parents who are beating themselves up because they didn't save enough, or, they feel like they're behind the 8 ball and filling out their FAFSA or whatever it might be, or they might get a question wrong and ruin it for their kids. And it's just providing them reinsurance that, they're doing their best and that's good enough. And everybody, there's so many people in the same boat as them to make them feel reassured that they're not alone, that everybody's in the same thing. And then we also talked about removing the shame and secrecy about talking about finances. So, parents, don't want kids to see what's on their FAFSA, or they don't want to talk about finances. So students are often, left to try and pick up the pieces because they're trying to scramble to figure out, what might be missing on a form, or how to pay their bill, because mom and dad don't want to talk about how little or how much money they have. So families aren't having meaningful conversations about finances. And the other thing we mentioned, I love the idea that we talked about earlier today about starting these conversations earlier at, age 4, elementary school, middle school, but who's going to do that work? We're not there to do it. We do outreach to high schools. A lot of us are doing financial aid nights and early college planning things, but we're not there. So who's going to take on that work? It's so critical. And then Kevin, I did want to give you a shout out about bending the rules a little. I'm always trying to, stretch things and bending the rules a little, not breaking them, to try and, help students a little bit more, because sometimes we're bound by policies and rules. And if we could just bend it a little bit, we could help that one student. And that's it.
That's awesome. Thank you, Stephanie, for sharing. So many nuggets of information in there. And just know too that the link that you have, you all can keep and take a look at some of the other documents so that you can see what other folks wrote. So yeah, this link will be yours. But yeah, group 4, do you have a reporter?
You guys want me to report? Okay, and the thumbs up. Okay, great. So we talked so much that we only covered a few questions, but it was a great discussion. One of the things that we talked about, the first question in terms of something that we'd like to try on our campus, Leanne talked about having vendors offering presentations on financial wellness kind of on demand. She'd like to create an opportunity for her students to get really needed information in a way that fits their schedule. And in a way that they, she's working with her IT department on this. Unfortunately, they've lost some staff, so it always slows things down, but trying to figure out a way to do this and also kind of have them account for what they've done, so that there's a way for them to show that they've completed this session. And she's talked about the possibility of vendors doing different vendors offering different sessions, or utilizing another source like Keon from Brands Ice told us that they use iGrad. And so there's a lot there. But one of the things that was mentioned was that when students go onto the iGrad site, it seems to be a little overwhelming, that there's so much, they don't know where to start. And so I thought that was a good thing for all of us to think about, that it's great to offer programming, but you kind of have to provide some guidance as to how to navigate that programming so that it doesn't feel overwhelming for students. So that was one thing that we talked about. And then we looked at question number 4, do you give the same advice to students as you would with family and friends? And we kind of talked about this from both sides, that yes, we give the same information to students as friends and family, but we also recognize that the same information is not cookie cutter approach. That the same as you would with your students, you would with friends and family. Everyone's in a different situation, so you would give them slightly different advice or information or things. Everyone gets the same things to think about, but they would process that differently. Dan talked about the Thanksgiving test. Is that, could you sit around the table and defend your choice to enroll? And I hate to say it that way, but could you speak to your choice and be able to explain it really to yourself or to your family members? We talked about, if you have a family member that's skeptical about what you're doing, do you really understand the financial implications to enrolling in school? And originally we started to talk about, if you can find a family member to talk about with this, but we recognize that in particular, first generation and underrepresented students don't usually have another family member that they can speak to, and that's a big challenge for them. So if they're able to find a mentor on campus, really in line with what Amy, Helena, and Kevin are talking about in terms of finding people on campus that can, or the people on campus finding them and giving them an outlet. If they can talk with them about, given my financial circumstances, is this something you would do, or how would you do that? And finding someone who can guide them through that is really important. So that's it. I don't want to take up too much more time. Sorry.
No, you brought up some great points as well. I mean, remember the last 5-ish, 10 years when texting became such a big thing for departments. And I think the on-demand piece is something that could transform, because maybe they do want to watch it at 1 a.m. and we're not going to be hosting sessions at that hour. So awesome. Thank you. Group 3.
I was the note taker, so I guess I'll go, but you can all look at my dog, Stevie, after Stevie next, instead of Stevie from Schitt's Creek, while I talk. Let me find this thing. We were pulled in like 8 billion directions while doing this, so please bear with us. So something tangible to consider trying on campuses. We said whether online or in person, doing sessions with alum who have gone through the program or through the process. They've launched into their careers, things to be aware of while in school, when departing, tips and tricks from them. I'm really, really trying to push on my campus something called For Balls in Finance, where I bring Stevie onto campus. MIT is very dog friendly for those who are not allergic and love dogs. So they can pet a dog while talking about finance, because we all know money is stressful. I think it's a great idea. Trying to convince bosses of that. We'll see how that goes. Things that we can do to make changes in how we work with students that could create more compassionate lens. Number one is listening to students and hearing what they want, implementing the changes as times and students change. We're not static. We don't live in a bubble. Making sure that we change and grow as our students change and grow. Different generations have different needs, and sometimes they have the same needs. So making sure that we're listening to them and really hearing them and what they need and want. And adjusting the type of outreach we do to make sure that we're reaching them in a manner that they want to be reached. And then how often we find ourselves sticking to the script rather than solving for the unique experience of the student. All three of us were essentially at the level where it's all, depending on the question, it's almost always unique. There really isn't a set script. The exception is really the limitations of federal regulations or your institutional policies in terms of where the limit is. But aside from that, the three of us were talking about how like each student's situation is a little bit different. There's typically not a script. It's really just trying to figure out where that limit is, or I mean, you can't go over direct loan limits, or there's just certain policies we're not going to be able to get around. Is the advice you share with students exactly what you would share with Stevie, friends or family? Excuse me, there's no one out there. And we said, yes. One of my teammates said it best. If you come, if you are coming from a place where you want the best for your students and for everyone, then you're going to be saying the same thing, because you want the best for your family, you want the best for your students. you're typically going to be sharing very similar or the same information. And if, you know, so we all agreed that generally providing guidance, you're not going to necessarily tell a student exactly what to do, but you're going to act as a guide, you know, provide resources. And if you're talking with a niece or a nephew, I bring up a niece because my niece went to college this year. You're going to act as a guide and provide resources, not be like, do this, this, and that, because the whole point is also to help them grow and learn. And then, where was I? How would you approach a student with no script or no rules? And since we generally said that we, you know, most of our situations, we don't go on a script. We come in with good intentions, we provide guidance, and most of the time the scripted piece generally is coming from the regulation side of things. So if it's scripted, it usually is within the strictest part of the policies, but other than that, it really shouldn't have a script. Students are really good at honing in when someone's just reading a script to them versus when you're coming in and being genuine. So you're better off not having practice scripts unless it's very policy driven. And then we didn't get to the last two questions, but let's see. In your role at work, how important is autonomy to you? Oh wait, we did get to this one. And is it supported by your superiors? We said it is important, and we are supported to a point. We can't just give money away, but it is important to have a level of autonomy in order for especially for students to feel comforted and feel like you can act as an advocate for them. You should have that level of support. And we did not get to the positive impact for the students this month or additional thoughts or considerations, but anyone can add to this Google Doc. So please do so.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. And seriously, like the commitment to thinking outside the box in terms of, you know, solving for the problem of it's stressful, so having a dog would be helpful. I mean, it's that kind of thing where you actually can get momentum, right? I guarantee you people will come up to you to pet the dog before they read what your table says, right? So I absolutely love that approach, and thank you so much for sharing. I know we're coming to the end of our time, and I don't want to limit our groups 2 and 1, but if you want to give us your top takeaways, we'll pass it over to group 2.
Can everyone hear me? Because I had some audio issues. Good, okay. So because of the audio issues, our discussion was a little bit fractured and we had 2 people that are kind of on duty, but so as not to kind of repeat the wheel, and I know we're low on time, our discussion was a little bit more free form. So we didn't necessarily focus on going through all the questions, but we did talk a little bit about compassion in our discussions. And Natasha shared some great information about at her institution, they had an opportunity to get feedback about students' hesitancy towards approaching financial aid. And they had actually tried to work out and put a plan in place to try to improve that. And so one aspect was creating some sort of financial wellness activities. Another was reaching out to students to try to reach out to them for more than just the canned reasons why we contact students, missing items or SAP or balances, things like that, trying to reach out to give reminders and helpful information. And that tied in with me. I'm new to my institution. I've only been there 3 months. So it's hard to speak as to what we do fully. I'm still learning, but there's always room to grow and develop in trying to connect with students, because financial aid is always going to be a hard office. It's always going to be one where people feel like we're the bad guys. And so it's important for us to be mindful of thinking of ways that we can bring them in for more than just, here goes my dog, bring for more than just kind of the required elements. And then we talked a little bit about what we can do about, what can we do within this month for change, for compassion. And so we just talked about thinking about more handwritten communications, because that will increase the likelihood that a student would connect if it seems like more than just a form letter. And for me personally, I'm working on some communications for incoming students. So I'll try to incorporate some of the things that have been mentioned here to try to put some words or phrasing that will soften up our message as it relates to missing items. And then the last element we talked about was autonomy. And so the individuals within our chat did feel autonomous, and they feel that they kind of have the ability to make their own decisions, but they also feel supported. And so that's always helpful. So I'll leave that for group 2. And it was great kind of connecting with those individuals. So thank you.
Thank you, Ebony. That was great. I would agree. I think the synthesizing and reflecting and like putting to practice, or just hearing the same struggles in other departments and other schools, kind of like gives you a breath of fresh air. Like, it's not just us, right? And wow, 3 months. Thanks for coming and continuing to learn. That's awesome. Everybody get Ebony's email and help her out with whatever she needs. All right, group 1. So it's all you now.
All us.
Closing us out.
Closing us out. We did more general kind of conversation, bounced around a little bit. One of the things that was tangible that people will consider or hopefully be able to implement would be bilingual information for both parents and students. One of the things we talked about was, don't dump it on your 1 or 2 bilingual staff to translate all of the documentation or all of the letters. At Salem State, we actually used our foreign languages department and brought in a couple students to kind of proofread and translate stuff for us, which served double duty. We were getting additional financial aid information out to students because they were reading and hopefully synthesizing it, and they were putting it into a language that students would understand. Agreed with everyone else as far as autonomy. Autonomy is key, gives everyone the ability to kind of think outside the box while still remaining within the bigger Department of Education box. What else did we talk about group 1? Feel free to jump in. Janet. The script thing, I shared a very quick, brief story in dealing with Xfinity. And I was having Wi-Fi issues, and the service tech agent on the phone asked me to unplug the router and plug it into another outlet. And I said, the electricity is the same in that outlet as that one. It's working, it's just not Wi-Fi. And she was like, oh, I know. And I said to her, you realize this is the stupidest thing I've been asked to do. And she said, she came off script and said, oh yeah, definitely, but we're required to ask you to do that. And that broke down the barrier, and she and I had a great conversation afterwards. So, it was an example of don't stick to this is the policy, this is why, because people can understand when you're being ingenuous. Ingenuous? That's good. Anything else from group 1? No? All right. That was group 1.
Thank you, Kevin. So I think all 3 of us are just going to give our parting words, and then we'll pass it back over to Dan and Jennifer. But, my biggest thing is we've learned so much in this half day together. My hope is that you'll take something tangible from either your group or another group and figure out a way to measure it. I know the SMART goal framework gets thrown around a lot, but it's a great place to start in terms of figuring out how to start implement some of these things and hold yourselves accountable, which is why I hope you grabbed a couple of emails from your colleagues to just check in and see how things are going. It's so nice to have a neutral perspective sometimes. So I'll pass it to Kevin, and thank you so much for having us today.
I just want to say thank you all again for joining us today. And one point I would say take away with you is be yourself. when dealing with students and parents and then each other. Just be who you are. Don't try to come across as I'm a director. Just that's not your persona. Be your own persona, because people will connect with you and understand and feel that you're being genuine.
And I'm going to end with a dramatic reading, which is a final thought. Empathy is a journey, not a destination. The deepest form of understanding another person is empathy. Empathy involves a shift from my observing how you seem on the outside to my imagining what it feels like to be you on the inside, wrapped in your skin with your set of experiences and background, and looking out at the world through your eyes. As an empathetic listener, you are on a journey with a direction, but no destination. You will never arrive. You will never be able to say, I truly understand you. We are all too complex for that, and our skills to imagine ourselves into other people's lives too limited. But in a sense, that is good news. Psychologists have found that we are each more interested in knowing that the other person is trying to empathize with us, that they are willing to struggle to understand how we feel and see how we see. Then we are in believing that they have actually accomplished that goal. Good listening, as we've said, is profoundly communicative, and struggling to understand communicates the most positive message of all. Oh, mic drop, sorry. Forgot the microphone.
Very good.
All right.
Well, Dan, are you raising your hand or are you clapping? Are you clapping?
He's clapping, Dr. Amy.
That was really wonderful. Amy, I'm going to ask if you'll share that with us. Maybe we can post that to our website as well.
It's actually a great book called Difficult Conversations, How to Discuss What Matters Most. And you can see that I have lots of little tagged spots, but yes, I will send that.
Thank you.
And
I'm working on a little resources page of like everything from today. So I'll send it around to all the speakers if you could add any little things you want to, and then we'll send it out to everybody who attended today. So that we'll catch that stuff, hopefully.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone. I think it's been a really good day, and I appreciate everyone taking the time and sending the dog photos and just everything. So.
Yeah, thank you all so much. We hope you all got a lot out of this. We certainly did as our whole committee planning it, and we look forward to seeing you at some of our sessions at the conference, and we really extend our gratitude to all our speakers. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.
Have a great day.
Bye all.